أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. I seek refuge in Allah against shaitan the rejected, and I begin with the name of Allah, the eternal source of mercy and grace. I greet you all with the greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and blessings of Almighty Allah be upon one and all of you, and welcome to tonight's lesson. The lesson tonight in our series Truths of the Prophets will be Yusuf alayhi salam. It's quite an extensive story covered in the Quran. I think the most extensive one. The first, it's going to be divided into three parts. And the first part will be dealt with by Brother Riaz. We'll be doing that this evening, inshallah. So the presentation, again, will be for about 20 to 30 minutes. And thereafter, we look forward to your participation. So shukran, Brother Riaz, over to you. Riaz, are you there?
It's off. Sure. Maaf.
Okay.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Respected brothers and sisters in Islam, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we are looking at Yusuf alayhi salam, and Yusuf alayhi salam has been broken up into three lectures. Today we do part 1 and we do part 2 and part 3 next week. Now, if you look at the lineage of Ibrahim alayhi salam, we discussed Ibrahim alayhi salam in the last two lectures. Ibrahim alayhi salam is known as the father of monotheism. Ibrahim alayhi salam had two sons, Ismail and Ishaq. Now, from the lineage of Ismail comes Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But we're going to focus more on the lineage of Ibrahim via Ishaq today. And the Ishaq had a son, Yaqub, and Yaqub had 12 sons. And the prophet from among the 12 sons was Yusuf alayhi salam. So from here we can see clearly that the prophets of the progeny of Ibrahim alayhi salam, Ismail, Ishaq, Yaqub, and Yusuf. Now, maybe I'll do this overview a little later. We'll come to it at the end, just to give you an overview of the story of Yusuf alayhi salam in the Quran. So if you look at the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, نَحْنُ نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ أَحْسَنَ الْقَصَصِ, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us a most beautiful story in the Quran. If you look at the prophets, the only chronological story of a prophet from start to end is that of Yusuf alayhi salam. There are other two verses of Yusuf alayhi salam mentioned in the Quran. One is in Surah 6 verse 84 and another one in Surah 40 verse 34. But other than that, the whole surah is the story of Yusuf alayhi salam from beginning to end. So to begin with, we read A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Alif Lam Ra. These are the Tilka ayatul kitabil mubin. Inna anzalnahu Qur'anan Arabiyyan la'allakum ta'qilun. Nahnu naqussu alayka ahsan al-qasasi bima awhayna ilayka hadha al-Qur'an wa in kunta min qablihi la min al-ghafilin. Alif Lam Ra. These are the symbols of the verses of the perspicuous book. We have sent it down as an Arabic Quran in order that you may learn wisdom. We do relate unto thee the most ahsan al-qasas, the most beautiful of stories, in that we relate to thee this portion of the Quran. Before this, thou too was among those who knew it not. So this is the introduction of the story of Yusuf alayhi salam in Surah Yusuf. Now, if we look at the events of the first part, which I will be discussing today, the first verses will be verses 4 to 7. There's a dash missing there. Yusuf alayhi salam's dream was mentioned in verse 4 to 7. Then verses 8 to 10, we will discuss the jealousy of the brothers. There's apostrophe missing there. Verses 11 to 14, we'll talk about the plan of the brothers to get rid of Yusuf alayhi salam. Then verse 15 to 17, we'll be looking at the execution of the plan, what they did to get rid of Yusuf alayhi salam. And then verse 18, after they got rid of Yusuf alayhi salam, what was Yaqub alayhi salam's response to the excuse that they offered? And verse 19 and 20, we'll see that the caravan sold him in slavery in Egypt. Right, so beginning at verse 4, we read, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Behold, Yusuf said to his father, "O my father, I did see 11 stars and the sun and the moon. I saw them prostrate themselves to me." Said the father, "My dear little son, relate not thy vision to thy brothers, lest they concoct a plot against thee. For Shaitan is to men an avowed enemy. Thus will thy Lord choose thee and teach thee the interpretation of stories and events, and perfect his favor to thee and to the posterity of Yaqub, even as he perfected it to thy father Ibrahim and Ishaq aforetime. For Allah is full of knowledge and wisdom. Verily in Yusuf and his brethren are signs for the seekers after truth." So here we see the story begins with Yusuf alayhi salam telling his father about a dream that he has. And he tells his father that I saw 11 stars, which refers to the 11 brothers, the sun and the moon, which refers to the parents, the father and mother, and he saw them prostrate themselves before him. Now, the dreams of the prophets are not necessarily to be taken literally. And in this case, we see that they showed subservience to the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in following the Yusuf alayhi salam. And Yaqub alayhi salam, being a prophet of Allah and knowing his sons very well, he told Yusuf alayhi salam, "Do not tell your brothers about this dream. Because if you tell them about this dream, the jealousy is there, the jealousy, it has been growing for a time, and this jealousy can run out of control and they can do some harm to you." And basically, Yaqub, being a prophet, would not favor Yusuf above the rest of his children. As a person, nobody can control their emotions for anyone, but you wouldn't show it directly to your children. The brothers plotting, now that the brothers realize that Yusuf alayhi salam, they see Yusuf alayhi salam as a favorite to their father, they decide to plan against him. They said, "Truly Yusuf and his brother are loved more by our father than we, but we are a goodly body. Really, our father is obviously wandering in his mind." So they were discussing among themselves, and among them, one of them gave the suggestion, "Slay you Yusuf, or cast him to some unknown land, that so the favor of your Lord may be given to you alone. There will be enough time for you to be righteous after that." Said one of them, "Slay not Yusuf, but if you must do something, throw him down to the bottom of the well. He will be picked up by some caravan of travelers." So just to discuss the story, I just must one point in the earlier part of the story, the second last bullet, Yaqub alayhi salam gives advice to Yusuf alayhi salam and compliments him for the gift that Allah has given him. If you look at the verse, it says, verse 6, Thus will thy Lord choose thee and teach thee the interpretation of stories and events, and perfect his favor to thee and to the posterity of Yaqub, even as he perfected it to the fathers Ibrahim and Ishaq aforetime, for Allah is full of knowledge and wisdom. So the Yaqub alayhi salam realized that this is one of the gifts that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed on Yusuf alayhi salam. So the brothers plotted to get rid of Yusuf alayhi salam, coming back to the plan that they have. And this was because of the jealousy that they built up over time and the frustration of the jealousy. And they decided to do some harm to Yusuf alayhi salam. And in verse 9, it says, in verse 9, it's one important point. It says, slay you Yusuf and cast him to some unknown land, that so the favor of your Lord may be given to you alone. So the jealousy came out. There will be enough time for you to be righteous after that. So I think this is an important point. Sometimes you feel, no, you know what, I'll do the wrong, whatever it may be, and I'll be righteous after it. I'll make tawbah and I'll be okay. So this verse shows that to have that mentality is not encouraged in Islam. It's not good because you don't know when your time of death will come. And if you think that if you do something wrong, there will be time for you to be righteous after that, there is no guarantee. So it's important that we don't have this wrong attitude in life and in our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they go to their father now, the brothers, they've got a plan. They said, "Oh, our father, why do you not trust us with Yusuf, seeing we are indeed his sincere well wishes? He is our brother. Well, let us go with him. Let him come with us. Sorry. Send him with us tomorrow to enjoy himself and play, and we shall take care of him." Now, Yaqub alayhi salam, knowing the brother's potential of doing something wrong, Yaqub said, "Really, it saddens me that you would take him away. I fear lest the wolf should devour him while you attend not to him." They said, "If the wolf were to devour him while we are so large a party, then should we indeed first have perished ourselves." So Yaqub alayhi salam expresses his misgivings and his worries, but his brothers, his sons insisted that Yusuf alayhi salam goes with them. So they did take him away, and they all agreed to throw him down to the bottom of the well. And we put into his heart this message: "Of a surety, you shall one day tell them the truth of this their affair, while they know thee not." So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Yusuf alayhi salam was still young, was a young boy. They say maybe he was a teenager at this point in time. Allah knows best. And we see that Allah puts it into his heart that you will one day tell them the truth of this affair. So the time for this will come in one of the later presentations. Now they threw him down the well, and they came to their father at night. وَجَاءُوا أَبَاهُمْ عِشَاءً يَبْكُونَ. They came to their father at night crying. They came to their father in the early part of the night crying, weeping. They said, "Oh, our father, we went racing with one another and left Yusuf with our things, and a wolf devoured him. But thou wilt never believe us, even though we tell the truth." They stained his shirt with false blood. He said, so they took the blood from a sheep possibly, and then they stained the shirt, and they brought the shirt to their father crying that, his son was killed. And Yaqub alayhi salam, knowing something is up, he says, "Nay, but your minds have made up a tale that may pass with you. For me, for sabarun jamil. For me, patience is most fitting. Against that which you assert, it is Allah alone whose help can be sought." So basically, we see that they concocted their plan and they executed it. And Yaqub alayhi salam knows what they did. And he says, Sabrun Jamil. He knows the dream that Yusuf alayhi salam had before. And he knows that the brothers, his sons, are jealous. Then later there came a caravan of travels. They sent their water carrier for water, and he let down his bucket into the well. He said, "Ah, there, good news. Here is a fine young man." So they concealed him as a treasure, but Allah knows well all that they do. So a caravan of travelers came to the well, and they let down the water bucket or water, whatever the case means. They want to collect the water, and they found Yusuf alayhi salam there. And they sold him for a miserable price, for a few dirhams counted out. In such low estimation did they hold him. So they sold him in slavery when they went to Egypt. Now, that is the basic story that we see in today's section. Now, I just want to highlight a few points, interesting points to consider. So there is a ring structure in the surah. So there's an inner ring and there's a large ring. We'll talk about the full ring, the greater ring, when I conclude. So the inner ring, that is today's story, we see verses 8 to 10. The brothers plot and decide to throw Yusuf down the well, where he will be picked up by a passing caravan. And then we look at verse 19. A passing caravan picks up Yusuf and sells him as a slave in Egypt. So we see the link between 8 and 9, 10 and 19. Then 11 to 14, the brothers convince their father to send him with them. Jacob, concerns that the wolf will eat him up, he finally agrees to send Yusuf with them. That's verse 11 to 14. And then verse 16 to 18, again, the brothers go with false tears to their father, telling that the wolf ate Yusuf. They show the shirt with false blood. Jacob knows of the evil schemes and says he will have sabrun jamil, beautiful patience. And the and the central part of the ring that we have here is that the brothers throw him down the well, and Allah tells Yusuf that we will tell them one day the truth of what they did. So this is an interesting ring that we see here. Verses 8 to 10 says that he will be picked up by the caravan, and the caravan picks him up in 19. 11 to 14, the father fears the wolf will eat him up, and 16 to 18, they came with false blood to say the wolf ate him up. Central part is verse 15, where they throw him down the well, and Allah says that Yusuf will tell them one day the truth of what they assert. So some of the lessons that we see in today's lesson is Yaqub alayhi salam as a father. As a father, he wouldn't show jealousy to his sons. He knows, Yaqub alayhi salam knows his children, and he knows that that they may have evil plans, and he was aware of the jealousy, and he himself wouldn't deliberately favor his one son over the others. We see very clearly the evil effects of jealousy. We see the harm to the brother, which is Yusuf alayhi salam. And another case we could look at is the story of Abel and Cain in the Quran, where the jealousy of one led him to kill his brother because his gift was not accepted by Allah. We see that the brothers came to their father to say, no, send Yusuf with us, we are his well-wishers. And then that lie led to another lie where they had to come back to say, no, you know, the wolf ate him up, and you know, we were racing with each other. So when you lie, you have to create other lies to cover your first lie, and the lies go on. And we see the pretense that they showed. They said, Inna launa lanasihun, that we are his well-wishers. They came weeping, and they say we are telling the truth. And we highlighted the point. It says there will be time to you to be righteous after the fact that you did wrong. You will have enough time to be righteous, but we know that that's not the case. And then we see the sabr of Yusuf, where he was thrown in the well, and Allah tells him that he will tell them the truth of what they did one day. So imagine a young boy, Yusuf, in a well in the dark. It must have been a very difficult test. And it's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests you with different types of trials. And we see that he learned a beautiful lesson from this, and we will see what he says when he meets his brothers later in the discussion. And then we see that when Yaqub saw the evil intentions of evil actions of his sons, he said, Sabarun Jamil, beautiful patience, that Allah knows best as son. So the conclusion, I will just do the conclusion and I will highlight the overview of the surah. This surah has many trials of Yusuf alayhi salam. We see Yusuf alayhi salam is thrown in the well, and then he sold into slavery, and then we will see later that he's thrown into prison, and then he becomes the wazir, the minister of finance of Egypt, and he basically lost his family at the beginning. Then his family is reunited with him at the end. So this is possibly the highlight of the surah. We'll just read. They said, "Art thou indeed Yusuf?" When Yusuf alayhi salam's brothers come to him, we'll talk about this, as I say, in a later discussion. Art thou indeed Yusuf? They said, "Yes," to all of us. Behold, he that is righteous and patient. Never will Allah suffer the reward to be lost of those who do good. So that's the story of your life of Yusuf alayhi salam, where the story shows us that if you are righteous and patient throughout all trials of life, the difficulties and the goodness, if you are righteous and patient, never will Allah suffer the reward to be lost of those who do right. So that's the story that I have in terms of Yusuf alayhi salam for today. We did part 1, and just to highlight the overview of the surah, we did the inner ring that we talked about, but to highlight the big picture before I conclude. If you look at the surah, the overview of the surah, there's a prologue, and then there's an epilogue, the end of the surah, which is till verse 111. Then we got the story of Yusuf. We see the dream of Yusuf, that he had a dream, his 11 stars, the sun and the moon bow down to him. And then at the end, verse 99 to 101, we see that the dream is fulfilled where the brothers come to Yusuf and they bow down, which we will discuss later. Then verse 8 to 19, the brothers have a trick. They throw him in the well and he travels Egypt after being where he's sold into slavery. That's what we did today. 8 to 98. In verse 8 to 19, but in verse 58 to 98, Yusuf has a trick. And we see that there wasn't a well, there's a drinking cup in the trick. And then again, the brothers travel to Egypt. D, there's an attempt. Or C, we must see 20 to 22, Yusuf in the house of the Aziz. And then C, 54 to 57, Yusuf in society or in the house of the Aziz. Then you look at D, there's an attempt at seduction, the woman of Egypt. And then verse 50 to 53, we see the admission of guilt, and they ask for forgiveness for their wrongdoing, where Yusuf is absolved of the accusations that they had. And then E, which is the central part of the surah, we see that the prisoners have a dream when Yusuf alayhi salam is thrown into prison. Yusuf alayhi salam explains to them and gives them dawah in the prison. And then the king has a dream which Yusuf alayhi salam interprets. Full overview of the ring structure of the surah. With that, we will conclude today. If there's any questions or discussion or comments, we will continue. Over to you, Usman.
Okay, Jazakallah, Riaz. That was the first part of Yusuf alayhi salam. I'm sure you've got questions or comments as well. Please, as is normal, just unmute yourself for the questions and I'll come to you. Or you can type your question or comment in the chat box. So we did the first part of Yusuf alayhi salam tonight. I'm looking at my participants. I don't see any hands raised or mics unmute. Whatever questions are on your mind pertaining to what Malim Riaz discussed, please don't hesitate to ask. I'm going to give it 1 more minute. Sheikh, I see you on unmute.
Yes. Assalamu alaikum, Usman and brother Riaz. Alhamdulillah.
Wa alaikum salam, Sheikh. I was just waiting for you.
Waiting for me?
to add insight into the surah.
Now, you know, you asked, I just want to quote the, and Assalamu alaikum to all the other listeners as well, of course. There's one question I would like to ask. Then I want to make a little comment that, you see, what did the brothers observe when we say
Sheikh, sorry, I think you...
Sorry, yes, I'm on now. I was sorry I made him.
Right, you're on, yeah.
لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي يُوسُفَ وَإِخْوَتِهِ آيَاتٌ لِلسَّائِلِينَ. That Allah says there was signs for those who made inquiring mind. Now, what made the brothers say that is قَالُوا لَيُوسُفُ أَخُوهُ أَحَبُّ إِلَىٰ أَبِينَا مِنَّا. That Yusuf and his brother, that is meaning Yusuf and the younger, what we know they call in the Bible Binyamin, Benjamin, they are more loved, ahabbu ila abina, to our father than us. What was the behavior of Yaqub that made them do that? Because you look at it now, there were 12 brothers. The other 10 were told to go and look after the sheep and do everything. The other 2 were not sent out. They were kept like pampered children. Right? Don't you think Yaqub's behavior was, as a father, he was, you know, behavior was such that led the brothers to be jealous about these 2? That he is, in a way, with all due respect, and I want your comment on that, Brother Riaz, that his behavior led to the brothers' jealousy because he gave preferential treatment to them. That's one. The second thing is what I want to read from the Bible here. The Bible says, right, and I'm reading from the book of Genesis, right, that the brothers, what they did, Joseph's brothers killed a goat and dipped Joseph's fancy coat in its blood. After this, they took the coat to their father and said, "We found this, look at it carefully and see if it belongs to your son." Jacob knew it was Joseph's coat and said, "It's my son's coat. Joseph has been torn to pieces and eaten by some animal." Right? Then he says, now look at them. Like the Quran says, Fasabrun Jamil, that we're going to compare now. Jacob mourned for Joseph a long time, and to show his sorrow, he tore his clothes and wore sackcloth. All of Jacob's children came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. No, he said, I will go to my grave mourning for my son. So Jacob kept on grieving. Meanwhile, the Midians had sold Joseph, right? Now, what we find, if you compare the Quranic point of view, that as a Nabi, he must have been, first of all, he was an experienced shepherd, right? He knew that they, like he says, that you people have contrived a plot against the whole thing. But if you look at the biblical point of view, where he saw for, he cried and you saw he wore sackcloth and he knew that Joseph is dead, then that is why when we say, when we compare the Quran, when the Quran says it is a muhaymin, meaning that it is there to correct what the Bible may have left out. This is one of the things I find very, very important and unique, that the Quran actually says for sabrun jamilun, meaning I'm going to make sabr, one day my Yusuf will come back. But here the Bible says clearly, right, that he tore his clothes and wore sackcloth, all of Jacob's children, in spite of their consolation. You see, so that you find that as a Nabi, as an experienced shepherd, you find the Quran actually is more correct on this particular aspect of the story. Over to you, brother. I want to discuss that. What do you think that, my question is that, was it Yaqub's behavior that led to the jealousy because he favored the two children? What would you say to that?
Shukran, Sheikh. As you've mentioned that about the sabr, the prophets are basically have a high moral character and they have a high standard of relationship with Allah. Right, as you mentioned, what the sabr, he didn't know tear his clothes, at whatever the case may be. So when coming to his two young children as well, he was fair and just. However, the perception of the brothers was something that they saw it in another way. From my understanding, I see that Yusuf alayhi salam was still a young boy, and Benjamin was possibly younger, because when he goes to Egypt, it says walamma balagha ashuddahu, when he reached maturity, ayat, we granted him atenahul hukma wa ilma, we granted him knowledge and wisdom. So in this case, while he was still a young boy, he possibly was sheltered by his father, in a sense that they were youngsters, the two younger brothers, and as a result, the brothers looked at it with jealousy, and they thought the father is favoring them above, favoring the two young ones above them. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the question.
But you see, brother Riaz, among the 10, how old do you think they were? They couldn't, the last of the 10, possibly he was maybe 1 or 2 years older than Yusuf alayhi salam. Right, but he was told to go out in the wilderness and do the work, whereas these two were kept at home. You see, and therefore, when they noticed all this, the brothers could have said that, no, these are two little boys. We can still forget them because they don't have to come out with us. They don't have to give preference treatment. You see, so would you say it is? You see, when you get old, you mellow down and you are tough. Though older first children when you are young, and as you get older, you mellow down and you start doing more favorite, treat your younger children and your grandchildren with a kid's glove. I will also say that is also another point of view. But I agree with you that there was an age gap. Shukran, Jazakallah.
Okay, Jazakallah, Sheikh. Let's go on. I seen another unmute. Yusuf,
Sorry, I got kicked out. Sheikh, I got the gist of what you were saying. From I think that the Quran doesn't give a detail as to how old the brothers were and what happened. But from what we see in the Quran about all prophets, Sulaiman alayhi salam and Dawud alayhi salam and Yusuf.
Riyaz, sorry, you out again? Riyaz, we can't hear you. Riyaz, I think your Wi-Fi is, I think we lost Riyaz. Can you try and rejoin? Just give a minute. In the meantime, if there's any other questions, please unmute yourselves so I can come to you. Okay, Riyaz, I see you back. Riyaz, you there?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Yeah. Ankandu, I'll come to you now. Just after Riyaz finishes his comment. Riyaz, you want to finish your comment?
Yeah, sorry, man. I think the internet is troubling. From my understanding, the Quran doesn't give details as to what was the situation. I think that the prophets have a high standard and they'll do what is best. However, the perception of the brothers may not have been like that. So, because Allah doesn't give the details and they have a high standard of character, I wouldn't go with what the Sheikh says, but Allah knows best. So that's my take on the matter.
Okay, perfect. Let's move on. I seen Uncle Anwar's phone on unmute, so or your Zoom on unmute. You want to ask your question, Uncle Anwar? There you go.
I just have a comment. The brothers, the two, Yusuf alayhi salam, weren't they from another mother? So they were step brothers, isn't it? So that's maybe where the jealousy crept in. So that's maybe where the jealousy crept in, because they weren't from the same mother.
Possibly.
Okay, Jazakallah, thanks.
Okay, Jazakallah. I just the idea of this is to look at the lessons based on what's in the Quran. So I'd like us to just try and keep on that as best as we can to try and explore the lessons from Yusuf alayhi salam's story. So just a reminder, but can we move on? Any other questions or comments? Yusuf?
Hello.
You have to ask a question tonight.
Assalamualaikum.
Assalam.
Assalamualaikum. Okay, just to comment on what Sheikh Abdul Qadir was saying. The comparison, I thought the comparison between the Bible and the Quran was very enlightening. Just my take on it is just that, the Quran seems to be more accurate for me. in the sense that Yusuf alayhi salam spoke to his father about his dream, right? And then thereafter he disappeared. He disappeared. And immediately when the brothers, when the rest of the sons came back and explained to him, he immediately said that he believed that they had spun a yarn. And then the dream that the dream of the of everyone bowing to Yusuf alayhi salam had not been realized yet. So I think that in Prophet's dreams are true. So you would expect that to still happen. And if that didn't happen, then and it had Yusuf alayhi salam become deceased, killed by the wolf or whatever, then that dream would have no recognition of truth in it. So I think the idea of him having Sabrun Jamil is more accurate than him being in sackcloth and saying, "I'll go to my grave mourning my son." That's just my take on it.
Very interesting. Yeah. Riaz?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think you've put it very nicely, and I agree with you 100%.
Jazakallah.
Jazakallah, Yusuf. Okay, let's move on. Any other questions, comments, please simply unmute yourselves or post your question on the chat. Shabir?
Yeah, just Salam. Just extending on what Yusuf said now. If the dream was prophesied and Yusuf shared it with his father, that means his father understood what the dream was about. And the idea was for something to be fulfilled. So the conditions were being laid. Now, even when Sheikh said that maybe he was spoiling the son, he was spoiling Yusuf, so the other brothers would get jealous and they would resort to what they did. Maybe this was also planned by Yaqub himself, or as a precursor to what was going to come. Because how else will the dream be fulfilled if Yusuf was not taken away by these people and sold into slavery? So it's like how the Quran says in some other parts of another verse where it says everything that looks bad is actually not necessarily bad for you. So there's an outcome and a long-term plan by Allah that maybe the prophets were privy to. I'm sure in this case they were, to let it happen and unfold the way it did. So even whatever Yaqub set up in towards Yusuf being abducted, taken away, I think it was all planned. Okay, that's all I have.
Shabir, sorry, are you saying that Yaqub alayhi salam planned this, the abduction?
No, not Yaqub. He told his son, don't share this dream with your brothers.
Yeah, right.
Now, if he had, what would be the outcome? Why shouldn't he share the dream? Would his brothers have interpreted? I mean, would we underestimate their understanding of what the dream would be, or is it only Yusuf and Yaqub who understood it? But let's say you would have told them this is what I dreamt about. They might have said, you know what? I don't know. Maybe they would not have gone on with what they did. Now, when Yusuf shared it with his father, what did his father understand by it? And why would he tell him, don't share it with your brothers? Was he inspired to understand it? Like I said, the conditions had to be put into place. Let's assuming it didn't happen. Would Yusuf have been kidnapped? How was he going to get into the court of Firaun, where he was, and how was he going to become the Minister of Finance? I don't know. I'm just thinking the way it played out was all leading up to what was going to become, was going to be accomplished at the end.
Okay.
Okay, Shabir. Yeah. From my understanding, basically, Yaqub alayhi salam knew the mentality of his sons. He knew that they felt something about how he's treating Yusuf, whatever the case may be. And he realized that if Yusuf had to tell the other brothers about his dream, is basically going to aggravate that feeling of jealousy that they have. Whether it was justified or not, it's another story. So basically, he realized that in the best way to be wise, rather don't let him tell his brothers of the dream, so that basically, it won't aggravate the situation that's already brewing among the brothers. And then just another thing there about Yaqub alayhi salam knowing about what's going to happen. I don't feel that that is the case. I feel that he could see the dream, that that one day basically he'll tell them the truth of the matter, whatever the case may be. But how the events unfold is not something that the prophets will know about. They don't know the future. Yaqub alayhi salam wouldn't know what's going to happen, whether he be thrown in the well or go to Egypt or become the wazir. That was unknown to him. But he knows that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will lay out a plan according to the circumstances that are going to be laid out. I give you an example. When a Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was going to the Battle of Badr, he didn't know whether he's going to win or lose. But he had a dream that showed him the enemy as few and the believers as many. So basically, it's like he gave them confidence to do what is right. So Yaqub alayhi salam had to do his best. He had to have sabr in this case. And how things unfold, only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows how it will unfold. But because he saw the dream, he knows that Allah, he trusts in the planning of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that what is best for you will unfold at the end. So that's some of the thoughts that I have on your question, Shabir.
Yeah, no, I can agree with a lot of what you're saying. I'm just saying, to put it in specific context, to understand how Yaqub had this confidence that what Allah is actually doing is planning well, that he was going to see his son again, that his son was not eaten by the wolf. I mean, this takes a lot of strong iman, that is true. But now, on the other hand, it's also going to be saying, how are you going to imagine the best? I mean, his sons tell him the wolf, here's a blood-stained shirt. I mean, now, would the father have the knowledge to say, let me just analyze this blood and tell you it's not my son's? Maybe, okay, maybe he had a skill, I don't know. But the thing is, what's going to happen here is the events have to unfold. Like if we look at the story of Musa and Khidr, and the concept is they break the boat. And the outcome of the boat is the people themselves feel, this is a bad thing that was done. And then he explains to Musa, no, if I had not done it, and the boat was in a good condition, then the ruler of the land would have put these people, would have taken the boat. So it seems like a bad thing happened, but actually with a good outcome. Now I'm just saying, how is it going to feel so comfortable about it? Why would we say we're contrasting it to what the Bible said and what the Quran said? Of course, the Quran is true, but we've got to try and see now why. I mean, I'm just proposing an idea here. It's not that baby, I'm just thinking it out to try and understand what it could be meaning. But even what you say is still fine. I mean, he's talking about a dream where the sun and the stars are prostrating to him. So his brothers could definitely be very jealous and say, look at this guy, look at the arrogance of this guy, like everything, but submit to him. So yeah, okay.
Okay, Jazakallah Shabir.
Okay, right.
Any other questions, comments? I got a comment in the chat box. I want to read it from Sister Farah to everyone. Assalamu alaikum. I have a comment with regards to the son of Noor. He was also astray, so it may be the parent. It may not be the parent, but who the child is. I also agree that it could just be the perception of the children and not the parents doing. Yeah. Whatever those circumstances were, what we do know for sure is that the brothers did commit wrong and there was no justification for them to do that. And at the end, we'll obviously discuss the next two parts of the story as well, to look at what happened ultimately as well and how those events transpired. Okay. Anybody else? I don't see anyone else on unmute. Riaz, you want to make any concluding remarks before I then hand over to close tonight's session? Ammar, I see. I'm going to come to you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Salam.
Alaikum salam.
It's Tasneem, not Ammar. Sorry about that. I just have a comment. I find when you look at modern psychology and the three parenting styles, so like you get the authoritative, the authoritarian, and the permissive. I find that Yaqub alayhi salam is a perfect example of the authoritative parenting style, which is obviously we read the most effective parenting style. So the way, I find it very interesting in the way that he chooses peaceful parenting. In that, like, he regulates his own emotions. For Sabrun Jameel, he connects and he coaches instead of controls Yusuf alayhi salam. So I just find I find that very interesting.
Jazakallah for your comments. Very, very informative.
Jazakallah. Let's move on. Nothing else in my chat box, Riaz. I'm not seeing anybody else. In the meantime, any concluding remarks from your side?
Now, I'm just thinking aloud about what Shabir said, you know, about the planning of Allah. Basically, you do what is best and then you trust in Allah. If you look at the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, he was loved by his father, which looks like a good thing. But that led to the jealousy of the brothers and him being thrown down in the well, which is a bad thing. But then being in a well makes him looks like a bad thing, and then he's sold into slavery. But then that becomes a good thing because then he becomes he goes into the house of the wazir, the Aziz. Then the house of the Aziz looks like a good thing, but then he is there's an attempted seduction by the wife of the Aziz, which is a bad thing, which it lands him into prison. And then going into prison seems to be a bad thing, but there he meets the cupbearer, and the cupbearer basically introduces him to the king after the king has a dream, which makes him the ruler of Egypt. So it's interesting that in life you'll have good times and bad times, ups and downs. You don't know how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will play it out. But that's why I gave you that verse that says, if you have sabr, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be the best, giving the best outcome of things. So I think that's important, the lesson that I learned from the surah. Okay, Jazakallah, Osman.
All right, Jazakallah. I don't see any other questions or people are on unmute. I don't see anyone in my chat box. It's 9 o'clock already. Oh, sorry, about 9 o'clock. Let me close tonight's session, and inshallah, we'll see you all back next week, Tuesday, at 8 o'clock, inshallah. So look forward to seeing you all for part 2 of Yusuf alayhi salam. Thank you all for your participation. Jazakallah to Brother Riaz for the preparation and the presentation. And inshallah, as I said, see you all next week, Tuesday at 8 o'clock, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.